The sprawling kitchen of Ronaldo's Madrid mansion was a masterpiece of modern culinary design, with professional-grade equipment imported from Italy, state-of-the-art refrigeration systems, and enough counter space to accommodate preparation of meals for large dinner parties or intimate family gatherings. The room represented the pinnacle of luxury living, but it was also a working space where Chef Carlos Mendoza had been creating nutritionally optimized meals for Ronaldo and his family for the past 18 months. Carlos had been hired through a specialized agency that provided personal chefs to elite athletes and celebrities, and his background included training at some of Europe's finest culinary schools, along with experience working in Michelin-starred restaurants before transitioning to private service where he could earn significantly more money while working more reasonable hours than the punishing schedule of high-end restaurant kitchens demanded. Carlos had quickly established himself as more than just a chef in Ronaldo's household, becoming a trusted member of the domestic staff who understood not only the specific nutritional requirements of a professional athlete, but also the cultural preferences and family traditions that made meals meaningful rather than merely functional. His Portuguese heritage allowed him to prepare traditional dishes that reminded Ronaldo of his childhood in Madeira, while his professional training enabled him to modify traditional recipes to meet the strict dietary requirements that kept Ronaldo performing at peak levels well into his 30s. The working relationship had been excellent, with Carlos consistently exceeding expectations and earning praise from both Ronaldo and his family for the quality, creativity, and nutritional value of his meal preparations. The discovery that would change everything happened on a Tuesday evening in late November when Ronaldo returned unexpectedly early from a sponsor meeting that had been cut short due to scheduling conflicts. She entered through the kitchen entrance, as was his habit, preferring the informal atmosphere of the working areas of his home to the formal grandeur of the main entrances. What he saw as she opened the door was Carlos carefully packing what appeared to be a significant amount of prepared food into containers and placing them in a large bag that he was clearly preparing to take with him when he left for the evening. The quantities involved were substantial enough that it couldn't be explained as taking home leftover source samples, and Ronaldo's initial assumption was that Carlos might be catering a private event or preparing meals for another client, which would violate the exclusivity agreement in his employment contract. Carlos froze when he saw Ronaldo enter the kitchen, his face immediately showing the guilt and panic of someone caught doing something he knew was wrong. The food he was packing included expensive ingredients like organic salmon, grass-fed beef, and imported vegetables that represented a significant monetary value, but more importantly represented a violation of trust between employer and employee that could have serious legal and professional consequences for both parties involved. Ronaldo's first reaction was confusion rather than anger, because Carlos had always seemed honest and reliable, and the behavior he was witnessing seemed completely out of character for someone who had been a model employee for over a year and had never given any indication of financial problems or dissatisfaction with his working conditions. "Carlos, what's going on here?" Ronaldo asked, his voice calm but clearly expecting an explanation for what appeared to be theft of food and supplies from his kitchen. The question hung in the air, as Carlos struggled to find words could explain his actions without making the situation worse. His hands were still holding the containers of food, and his bag was half-packed with what appeared to be enough ingredients to feed a large family for several days. The evidence of his actions was undeniable, but Ronaldo could see that Carlos was genuinely distressed about being caught rather than defiant or unapologetic, which suggested that there might be more to the situation than simple theft motivated by greed or dishonest. With the emotional state of his chef made Ronaldo pause and consider that there might be circumstances she didn't understand driving behavior that was completely uncharacteristic. Carlos's response came in a rush of emotion and desperation as the months of stress and worry that had driven him to this desperate measure finally overwhelmed his ability to maintain the professional composure that had defined his relationship with Ronaldo. "Mr. Ronaldo, I am so sorry. I know what this looks like, and I know how wrong it is, but my sister and her 3 children have been living in my apartment for the past 4 months since she lost their job, and they don't have enough food." His confession tumbled out between tears and stammered apologies. "I've been sending most of my salary to help pay for their rent and utilities, and there's never enough left over for groceries for 4 additional people. I started taking small amounts of food home just to make sure the children had enough to eat, but it kept getting worse as the bills got higher and I didn't know what else to do." The explanation revealed a depth of family crisis and personal sacrifice that Ronaldo had never suspected, despite working closely with Carlos every day. The full story emerged as Carlos continued his emotional confession, revealing the complex web of family obligations and financial pressures that had driven him to risk his career and reputation by stealing from his employer. His sister, Mariah, had been laid off from her job at a textile factory when the company relocated operations to Asia, leaving her with 3 children, ages 6, 8, and 11, and no immediate prospects for employment that would provide enough income to support their family. Her unemployment benefits were minimal and temporary, and the father of her children had disappeared years earlier, leaving no financial support or assistance with childcare responsibilities. Carlos had initially offered to help temporarily by allowing his sister and her children to move into his small apartment while she searched for new employment, but 4 months later the situation had become permanent rather than temporary, as decent-paying jobs proved impossible to find. Carlos explained that his decision to steal food had been gradual rather than premeditated, starting with taking home small portions of leftover ingredients that would otherwise be discarded, and escalating over time as his family's financial situation became more desperate. At first, I only took things that were going to be thrown away, vegetables that were still good but not perfect enough for your meals, leftover portions that wouldn't be used again. He said, but then my nephew got sick and needed medicine, and my sister couldn't afford to buy groceries that week. So I started taking more substantial amounts of food, telling myself that I would pay you back somehow when things got better, but things never got better, they just kept getting worse. And I kept taking more food because I couldn't stand the idea of those children going hungry when there was so much food here that sometimes gets wasted anyway. His rationalization revealed the psychological pressure and moral conflict he had been experiencing as his family responsibilities clashed with his professional ethics. Ronaldo listened to Carlos's confession with growing understanding and empathy, rather than the anger that Carlos had expected and feared. The situation was clearly a case of desperation, rather than greed, and involved family members who were genuinely in need, rather than someone trying to profit from stolen goods. The emotional toll that the situation had taken on Carlos was evident in his appearance and demeanor, and Ronaldo could see that his chef had been carrying enormous stress and guilt about his actions, while trying to maintain his professional responsibilities and family obligations simultaneously. The human complexity of the situation made it impossible for Ronaldo to respond with simple condemnation or immediate termination, because it was clear that Carlos's actions had been motivated by love and responsibility rather than selfishness or dishonesty. Instead of expressing anger or threatening legal action, Ronaldo surprised Carlos with a response that demonstrated both his emotional intelligence and his understanding of how financial pressure can drive good people to make desperate choices. Carlos, why didn't you come to me about this situation? He asked. I would have helped you find a solution that didn't require you to risk your job and your reputation. You've been an excellent employee, and I value both your work and your character, but I can't help you if I don't know what's happening in your life. The question revealed Ronaldo's disappointment that Carlos hadn't trusted him enough to ask for help directly, rather than resorting to theft as a solution to his family's problems. But it also opened the door for a conversation about how to address the underlying issues that had created this crisis. Carlos's response showed the complex emotions and practical concerns that had prevented him from seeking help directly. Mr. Ronaldo, I was embarrassed about my family's situation, and I didn't want you to think less of me or question my ability to manage my own affairs. He explained, I also didn't want to put you in an uncomfortable position by asking for personal favors that go beyond our professional relationship. I know you're generous with charities and causes, but this felt too personal and too much like asking for handouts rather than earning what my family needed. His explanation revealed the pride and dignity that had made asking for help seem more difficult than stealing, despite the obvious risks and moral compromises involved in his chosen approach. The cultural and psychological barriers to seeking assistance had seemed insurmountable, even when dealing with an employer who was known for his generosity and concern for others. Ronaldo's response demonstrated why he had become not just a successful athlete, but a respected leader who understood how to turn difficult situations into opportunities for growth and positive change. Carlos stealing from me was wrong, and it violated the trust that's essential to our working relationship. He said, but I understand why you felt desperate enough to take that risk, and I respect that you were trying to take care of your family, even though you chose the wrong way to do it. His acknowledgement of both the wrongness of Carlos's actions and the understandable motivations behind them created space for a conversation about solutions rather than simply punishment or termination. The balanced response showed emotional maturity and leadership skills that extended far beyond sports into real-world situations involving complex human problems. What happened next would transform a potential disaster into one of the most meaningful relationships in both men's lives, as Ronaldo made a decision that would address not just the immediate crisis, but the underlying issues that had created it. Carlos, I'm going to make you a proposal. He said, I'm not going to fire you, and I'm not going to report this to the police, but we're going to solve your family's problems together in a way that preserves your dignity and gives your sister and her children real opportunities for independence rather than just temporary assistance. The offer exceeded anything Carlos had hoped for and demonstrated Ronaldo's understanding that sustainable solutions required addressing root causes rather than just symptoms of poverty and desperation. The comprehensive approach would create lasting change rather than temporary relief. Ronaldo's plan involved multiple components designed to address both immediate needs and long-term stability, starting with relocating Carlos's sister and her children to a larger apartment that Ronaldo would pay for directly while Maria searched for employment. He also arranged for the children to receive tutoring and educational support that would help them succeed in school despite the disruptions they had experienced due to their housing and financial instability. Additionally, he connected Maria with employment opportunities through his business network and provided financial support for professional development courses that would qualify her for better-paying positions than the factory works she had lost. The comprehensive assistance package was designed to create genuine opportunities for self-sufficiency rather than permanent dependence on charity. For Carlos, their solution of his family crisis allowed him to refocus on his professional responsibilities without the constant stress and moral conflict that had been affecting his work and his health. Ronaldo also increased his salary and provided performance bonuses that reflected his value as an employee, while ensuring that he would never again face financial pressures that might tempt them to make desperate choices. The professional relationship was rebuilt on a foundation of honesty and mutual understanding that made it stronger than it had been before the crisis, when both men had been operating with incomplete information about each other's circumstances and values. The experience taught both of them valuable lessons about communication, trust, and the importance of addressing problems directly rather than allowing them to fester into crises. Maria's transition back to financial independence took several months but was ultimately successful as she completed training in medical administration and secured a position at a private clinic that provided stable income and benefits for her family. The children's academic performance improved dramatically once their living situation stabilized and they were able to focus on school rather than worrying about basic necessities like food and shelter. The entire family's transformation from crisis to stability became a source of pride and satisfaction for Ronaldo, who had learned that sometimes the most meaningful victories happen off the field when individuals choose to help others achieve their potential rather than simply advancing their own interests. The story of Carlos's theft and redemption became known among Ronaldo's household staff and business associates as an example of how problems could be solved through honest communication and genuine care for others, rather than through punishment or dismissal. The incident established Ronaldo's reputation as an employer who valued loyalty and character over perfection, and who was willing to invest in people who demonstrated integrity and potential even when they made mistakes under pressure. Several other staff members approached Ronaldo with personal and family problems over the following years, confident that he would respond with understanding and practical assistance rather than judgment or termination. The culture of trust and support that developed in his household became a model for how successful people could use their resources to create positive change in the lives of people who worked for them. Years later, when Carlos had become head chef at one of Ronaldo's restaurants, and Maria had advanced to a supervisory position at the medical clinic, both siblings would credit that difficult evening in the kitchen as the turning point that changed their family's trajectory from poverty and desperation to stability and hope. Cristiano taught us that mistakes don't define people unless they refuse to learn from them. Carlos would say in interviews about his employer, "He could have destroyed my career and my reputation, but instead, he chose to help me become a better person and a better provider for my family." That kind of generosity and wisdom is rare in this world, and it changed not just our circumstances, but our understanding of what success really means. His transformation from desperate employee to successful chef became an inspiration to others facing similar challenges, and demonstrated that second chances could lead to extraordinary outcomes when they were granted by people who understood the difference between character flaws and situational desperation. The incidentals so influenced Ronaldo's approach to charitable giving and employee relations, leading him to create formal programs that provided emergency assistance to staff members facing family crises or financial hardships. The programs were designed to preserve dignity while providing practical help, and became a model that other celebrities and business leaders adopted in their own organizations. The systematic approach to helping employees and their families created loyalty and dedication that extended far beyond normal employment relationships and contributed to Ronaldo's reputation as someone who understood that true success involved lifting others rather than simply accumulating personal wealth and achievements. The evening that began with the discovery of theft ended with the creation of relationships and systems that would improve lives for years to come, proving that sometimes the most important victories are the ones that happen when noon is watching.